do not talk, or I try not to talk a lot about politics or elections or things like that here, but felt compelled just in the world we live in to do that. So here's the thing, we talked about this last week. I feel like, right, politics and God, right, they're difficult, they're uncomfortable things to talk about, but I do think that there are times when they're important things to talk about. Our world is so politically centered that it matters that we understand as a church how a Jesus-following believer of the Bible lives in that kind of environment. Now, again, I'm going to say it again, I said this last week, I don't think telling you who to vote for is our job, and I don't think it's the church's job, if I'm honest. I don't think even telling you to vote is our job or the church's job. I think engaging in a discussion about how to live as Jesus followers in a world that's doing that is the job of the church. And it is the responsibility of the church. And when the church is silent on that, other people will just grab hold of what they think the identity of the church should be in those areas. And I think that can get dangerous, and I think it can definitely distort what it means to be a follower of Jesus. So that's why we're doing this, even though it's uncomfortable. And to do it, over these 2 weeks, we're focusing on James 1, 19 through 27, right? And there's specifically 2 verses that are guiding these 2 weeks. Somebody read that. It's up there. Somebody read what those 2 verses say. There's going to be 2 slides. So who's going to read it? Go for it. Out loud. How about that?
If some fail to do what God requires, it's as if they forget the word as soon as they hear it. 1 minute they look in the mirror, and the next they forget who they are and what they look like.
Go to the next slide real quick for me. All right, go ahead.
However, it is possible to open your eyes and take in the beautiful, perfect truth found in God's law of liberty and live by it. If you pursue that path and actually do what God has commanded, then you will avoid the many distractions that lead to an amnesia of all true things, and you will be blessed.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. So see that last part there that's highlighted right there in yellow. That's our goal, Highlands. We want to pursue a path of actually doing what God has commanded, so that we can avoid the many distractions that lead to an amnesia of all true things. I think that's what election season is. It is many distractions that lead to an amnesia of all true things. And in that way, be blessed. We want to be blessed, right? Blessing is good. We want that. So last week, we talked about framing our priorities going into an election. We looked at what James says about true religion from God's perspective. And it's concerned with 2 things. Don't do it yet. It's concerned with 2 things. Does anyone remember what those 2 things are? Does anyone remember one of those 2 things?
The forgotten.
I knew you wouldn't. Does anybody remember any of those things?
It's more important to remember the poor.
Yeah. Orphans and widows. I'm going to give you that on the poor. Orphans and widows, usually poor. All right. And
The forgotten.
protect yourself from the evil world. Yeah, go to that next slide. Good job. We did good. Care for orphans and widows and resist the evil influence of this world. Right? We said it's fine and maybe even good sometimes to be politically engaged and concerned. But we must prioritize it properly. We talked about how to know if that's happening and how to address it. If you weren't there or you want a refresher on that, it is on our YouTube page. You're like, I didn't know we had a YouTube page. Look at all the things we're learning today. It's on our podcast. You're like, I didn't know we had a podcast. Go to the website and find the podcast. It's great. It all works together. All right, so this week, we are going to look at how we should frame our engagement with other people as this election comes and goes. Because it's going to come and go really quickly. All right, well, it's going to come really quickly. I don't know if it's going to go really quickly. And so if you're already ready to check out, if you're like, I've heard enough about elections, then I would just ask that you remember these 2 things. I talked about it last week. Right? First, whatever happens on Tuesday and after, do not act like people with no hope. We are not like people with no hope, followers of Jesus. Second, whatever happens Tuesday and beyond that, pray for our country's leaders. It's really important. Really important call of Christians to pray for our country's leaders. All right, so if you checked out, boom, there you got the things, eat a biscuit, and I'll catch back up with you at the end. All right? Our focus in the scripture this week is going to be verses 19 through 22. All right, so go ahead and bring those up. Actually, 19 and 20 really are what we're going to focus on. Now, somebody besides Amy, because Amy's already done her due diligence of the day, somebody read those 2 verses.
Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires.
All right, can you see where we're going? We're not hiding the ball here. When I ask people, and I do this, you may say, why would you do that? But when I ask people how they feel about this coming Tuesday, right? If I were to ask you, how do you feel about this coming Tuesday? Almost nobody has talked to me about who they hope wins. And almost nobody is talking about who they hope loses. Most people say things like this: I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm worried. And they're worried and nervous and anxious because they're like, what are people going to do? What's going to happen? Are people going to get angry? Are people going to get violent? Right? And in a world that is nervous, anxious, worried, and potentially angry or violent, followers of Jesus are called to produce the righteousness that God desires. Bottom line for this week, a Jesus-centered biblical framework for the election season is slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to become angry. Why? Why is that the case? Because that will produce the righteousness that God desires. That will produce the righteousness that God desires. So one of the things they have you do when you go to officer school at Fort Jackson is that you do this thing called land navigation. And what land navigation is they give you a compass, something that they call a protractor. I've never seen a protractor that looked like this. And a really crude map. And then they give you some points, and they say you have to start here, and you have to find your way to all these different points just using this compass, this protractor, and this crude map. And so we did it once in the daytime and once at night. And so in the daytime, you're walking through the woods, you're trying to find these really obscure points. They're marked off, but you can't really see them from far away. And when you're walking around in the daytime, what you recognize is you're like, there's a lot of junk out here. There are really big holes that you could fall into if you're not careful. If you're trying to go towards a spot based on your compass, there are trees and bushes and all kinds of things, and there are spiders that could sit next to you at this table and have a conversation. They are giant. And so when you're doing it during the day, you're like following your compass, and you go, whoop, and you move when the hole's there. Or you go, whoop, and you move when the big old spider web's there, right? But they also make you do it at night. And at night, you know all those things are there, but you can't see them. And so you literally just walk straight in to brush and bushes. And you don't know how to go around it, so you just push through. And it is difficult and it is hard, but you do it because you know, I have to find these points. I have to get to this destination because this destination is the goal. This destination is the reward. Right? And in these verses that we just read, there's a pathway and there's a destination. And the pathway is only worth it if it leads you to the right destination. So too often, I think as people who want to follow Jesus, we focus on the path to God's destination for us rather than God's destination. And here's a spoiler for you if you haven't figured this out. The path to God's destination is almost always difficult. It is almost always hard, especially when things are dark. Like you run into stuff. Slow to speak? I hate being slow to speak. I love talking before I think. It's like one of my favorite things. I'm really good at it. Quick to listen? Oh, it's so annoying. I just wish they would stop talking so I can say my thing. Slow to become angry? So difficult in an angry world. Right? That is not an easy path. And if you focus on those things, you will tap out. Like you will give up. At Tuesday and after Tuesday, if you focus on I just got to do these things, I just got to do these things, eventually you're like, forget it. Nobody else is doing them. I'm not going to do them. But with God, the destination is always more than the difficulty of the path. It's like throwing training. Yeah, wow. I said, with God, the destination Hello? Well, all right. We don't know why that happened. With God, the destination's always worth more than the path is difficult. All right? God's destiny for us, God's destiny for you, God's destiny for everybody is that we would become, I'm going to back up a little bit, see what that is. Is that we would become the righteousness of God. That we would become, not just that we would practice the righteousness of God, but actually 2 Corinthians 5:21 says Jesus became sin for us so that we would become the righteousness of God in the world. All right, righteousness is a weird word. We don't use it a lot, and when we use it, it's pretty negative. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to figure out righteousness, Alex. Okay? I'm going to give you, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get together in groups of 3 to 4. 2 is a date, 5 is a crowd. We don't do either of those on Sunday morning. All right? So groups of 3 or 4. All right? That's your rule. I want you to get in groups of 3 or 4, and you have 5 minutes to come up with a 1 to 2 sentence definition for righteousness. All right? Who wants to volunteer? Let's go first. What's your name? All right, Josh, and your team.
The act of being just and right with God.
The act of being just and right with God. I like it. Okay. Anybody got something they want to add to that? Anybody got different things? Something else? No, you guys feel like they knocked it out of the park? Come on, somebody. All right, over here. Rebecca, what's yours?
I don't know. We were just doing some morphology.
I forgot. Careful. Rebecca Anderson has a degree in almost everything, so she's probably going to win at this.
Yeah, just the root word is right.
Okay.
And so what Josh said, right and just and good and all the things that right and clean.
Okay, all the things that right.
Full of truth. Full of truth.
All right, full of truth. Cool. All right, give me a couple more. What do you got back, Chris?
Well, there are kind of like 2 ways that it's used. It's like us being righteous, but then God himself is also referred to as being righteous.
Yeah.
So we didn't have like we were talking about it like when we talk about it for ourselves, it's like the state of being in right relationship with God. But when we talk about it in terms of God being righteous, like in right relationship with himself, like he's sinless.
Yeah.
Just like what you guys are saying, like the state of justice.
Yeah, no, that's good. Just see the different sides of it, the perspective. Right, that's good. All right, who else? You guys really want to go? I feel like go.
Godlike.
God-like. All right, we'll take it. Simple. Good point. What about over here? Nobody's going over here.
We just added basically the same thing that he said, but with God and others.
What's that? With God and others. Okay, being right with God. No, that's good. So
You're righteous, you're probably not.
That's awesome. So, no, it's good. So did you guys want to go? You didn't get to go. I didn't want to for sure. All right. So is there anything you guys would include? Is there anything you guys would highlight that was included?
We said perfect and blameless in God's eyes.
Perfect and blameless in God's eyes. Yeah, so you guys bring up a lot of good things. It's a weird word, right, in our culture, and it's all about what or who you're relating it to. If you're talking about yourself as being righteous, you're right. It's like, I don't know if somebody's talking about themselves as being righteous. You're talking about God as being righteous, that seems to make sense. And then it's how are we relating to that part of God? And can we even relate to that part of God? These are all important questions when we hear the scriptures say that we're supposed to produce the righteousness that God desires, but also that in Jesus we become God's righteousness to the world. So scholars who look at the word that's translated as righteous here in James, some of these things are things you guys said, or versions of what you guys said. These are synonyms they come up with, right? Integrity, having virtue, having purity of life, rightness, as most of you pointed out, correctness of thinking, feeling, and acting. So when you think about your definitions, you think about that, here's what I want you to grab hold of. God's destination for us is that we would be his representatives of that to the world. Another way of saying that, the way they say it in Genesis, is that we are the imago Dei, the image of God. We're supposed to be someone in something that the world could look at. They could say, oh, if God was here right now, that's how God would act. And what Augustine said was, we will never find rest for our souls outside of that. Outside of producing the image of God. And post-election, anxiety, anger, fear, pride, sadness, all of those things are going to wear out people's souls. But producing integrity, virtue, purity of life, rightness, correctness of thinking, feeling, and acting, those will make someone a place of rest in the chaos, a harbor in the storm. And here's what I'm going to tell you. That's not just an election thing. That's not just a Bible thing. That's just a thing. You can think about any relationship in your life, and that will be true. You can think about your marriage. You can think about your relationship to your parents, your relationship to your children, your relationship to your co-workers, your relationship to your friends, your relationships in this community. If you are a person who produces integrity, virtue, purity of life, correctness of thinking, feeling, and acting, in any chaotic situation, you can be a place of rest in the chaos, wherever that is. So we're going to talk about how, but as we talk about it, I don't want you to just think about it in terms of this election, even though that's how we're framing it. I want you to think about the places in your life that are anxious, the places in your life that are nervous, the places in your life that you're worried, the places in your life where there is anger, the places in your life where there is violence. And I want you to think about what God would want to be produced in you and through you in those places, and how this might be the path. Okay, so I just want you to get that place in your head. If it's the election, grab it. If it's something else, just grab it. And then you can apply these three things. This path to producing the righteousness of God. First is this: be quick to listen. Be quick to listen. And that is this coming week and beyond. Quick to listen to who? Well, first I would say quick to listen to God. God is always a good first place to go. Listen to God. Whether it's the election or whether it's a tough relationship in your life or a work situation, stop and be quick to listen and say, God, what do you think about this? How do you feel about this? What are you doing or saying in this moment? Now, some of us would say, I don't know how to listen to God. Well, the first easy place to go to listen to God is this place called the Bible. Right? It's just easy. It's easy. I you say the Bible's easy. There are parts of it that are easy. There are parts of it that are difficult. But there are parts of it that you can read. James. We're in James right now. James is such a practical book. Just go to James. Read James. I said this last week. Read James every day. You can read it in 30 minutes, 45 tops if you're a slow reader. And just ask yourself, what does this tell me about what God thinks about this situation in my life? But God also speaks to us through revelation, through prayer. Spend time doing that. God speaks to us through other wise people, other people who love God and love us. Listen to God. Second thing I would say is listen to the people that are hurt. Listen to the people that are hurt. God really, really cares about hurt people. You might say they're being silly or stupid, or they're hurt because they're a bad person, or because they don't get it, or they don't care about other people. But God doesn't first say that. He doesn't first say that to me when I'm hurt. He doesn't first say it to you when you're hurt. And so just take time and listen to hurt people. Why are they hurt? And what's the hurt behind the hurt? That's always the case. If you've ever been in a relationship where somebody expresses a hurt to you, generally the first hurt is not the final hurt. And so take your time and really listen about where the hurt is coming from. Third, I would say listen to people that are happy. I don't know what your thoughts are about this coming Tuesday, but if you're like, I don't know why anybody would be happy after this Tuesday, maybe you are. I don't know, but some people are going to be happy. And listen to them. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to why they're happy. And try to figure out like what's going on. Is there some truth in why they're happy? Is there some good in why they're happy? Or is there not? Is that a distortion of something and I need to be aware of that? Listen. And then listen to your own soul's response to all of those things. Right? Sometimes what I notice the most and what bothers me the most is how my soul responds to somebody else. Or how my soul responds to what God's doing. And something comes out, and at first I want to justify what comes out of my soul, but beware of confirmation bias. Right? Beware of just thinking because your soul is angry, God is angry. Beware of the thinking just because your soul is happy that God is happy. Beware of confirmation bias. Stop and say, oh, why is my soul doing that? And examine that. Examine, what is my soul producing? Is it producing the righteousness of God? Or is it producing something else? So be quick to listen. Second is this, be slow to speak. Be slow to speak. And I would say, if you're somebody who is slow to speak starting this Tuesday, the first reason you should do that is just enjoy being different in the entire world. Because no one is going to be slow to speak. No one in this world is going to be slow to speak on Tuesday. I promise you. Or Wednesday or Thursday. Everybody's going to be talking. And then most of it's going to be not great. So be slow to speak. Be different, because we're supposed to be different in this world. Recognize the power of your words. James says this. He says this later. If you've been reading James, you've seen this. He says this later. He says, our words are like a fire, right? They can start a fire in people's lives. And fire can do a couple of things, right? It can produce destruction, or it can produce life and warmth and provision. What are your words going to do? Pay attention to the power of your words. That's why you should be slow to speak. And I would say in our world, your words build your platform. There are so many places where we get to express our words in our world, right? A lot of them are right here. And your words build your platform. Do not burn your platform down because you're quick to speak when things are going on. And again, that's not just true in the election. That is true in every relationship in our lives. And if you're going to speak, here's what I would say. Write it down first. For yourself. Not for everyone to see. Then rewrite it. Then get some feedback from somebody who you love and trust. James says this in verse 26. We didn't read it today, but he says this in verse 26. He says, if you put yourself on a pedestal, thinking you become a role model in all things religious, but you can't control your mouth, then think again. Your mouth exposes your heart, and your religion is useless. I'm going to tell you the reason that bothers me is because I've done it. I thought I was super Christian, probably in my own heart, and then seeing how quickly words come out of my mouth that I didn't control and that I didn't think about, and they hurt people. Slow to speak. Last thing, be slow to become angry. It's no fun to be slow to become angry in a world that's angry all the time. People will tell you this, oh, that's such a privilege you have to not be angry. And what I would say is say this back to you, it is a privilege. It's a privilege that was bought for me by the grace of Jesus. That I don't have to immediately get angry at what's happening. Because here's the thing, guys. Anger, once started, is hard to stop. Anger, once started, is hard to stop. Okay, will you put that next slide for me? Okay. Yeah. So be slow. Because there are times for anger. There are. The Bible's clear. There are times for anger, but it's not as many times as we'd like to think. And I'll tell you this, although there are times for anger, there is time for anger. You can wait. You can wait, and you can measure it, and you can test it, and you can ask the Lord if it's His anger or your anger. You do all of those things. And you will still have time to be angry the right way. I promise you. The reason I know that is because God is so slow to get angry. God is so slow to get angry. That's what the scripture tells us. He is slow to anger, but abounding in love. And if God says, I've got time to get angry. If God, who has seen the world do so many terrible things, and so many terrible things in God's name, and God has said, I will still be patient, and I will be slow to anger, you and I have time. We have time to get angry. I can tell you this. I don't know about your specific situations, but I know after Tuesday, most of our world is going to be slow to listen, quick to speak, and quick to become angry. And we know what that's going to produce. It's going to produce division. It's going to produce fear. It's going to produce violence. It's going to produce arrogance. It's going to produce anxiety. And the list can just keep going and going and going and going. But you know what's worse than all of that? What's worse than any election outcome is that the followers of Jesus, who know that they're supposed to be the image of God, will just produce the exact same thing that the world is producing. That's what's worse. Matthew 6, 22 and 23, it says this: the eye is the lamp of the body. You draw light into your body through your eyes, and the light shines out to the world through your eyes. If your eye is clouded or evil, then your body will be filled with evil and dark clouds. And the darkness, hear this, and the darkness that takes over the body of a child of God who has gone astray, that's the deepest, darkest darkness there is. Why? Why is that the deepest darkness? Because a child of God is supposed to be the light of the world. A city on a hill. A child of God is supposed to be the place that worried, anxious, nervous, and angry people should be able to look for a hopeful, different way. It's not a political candidate that they're supposed to be able to look to. It's not a political party. It's not even a strong country. Jesus says it's you. It's me. We're where they're supposed to be able to look. And if our light is darkness, it's not good. And if you're like me, I hear all of that, I say all of that, and I think, that is way too difficult. I do not want that. I can't do that. How could I ever do that? And here's what I'm going to say. You can't. If you can't, I can't. But God can. Take you guys back to that 2 Corinthians 5:21 verse. God made him, that's Jesus, who had no sin, to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So last week, I don't know if you've ever done this, and we confess something to you. We missed the trash pickup. We missed our day. Got it out there too late. I knew it was too late. I took it out there anyway because I was like, maybe something. I don't know. I don't know why I took it out there. But I knew it. Our trash can was full. We did it one day. And I was like, well, we can't take it to Old Highlands. We used to just take it there and throw it in the dumpster when we were out. That's quite bad. And I thought, well, we're just stuck. And Jane thought, I'm just going to call the people in charge. And I thought that was ridiculous. I was like, what do you call the trash people and be like, hey, come back out, bring the trash truck back out? So she called them, though. And she said, hey, our trash is full. Can you come? We are never going to make it to next week with this much trash. And you know what happened? They came. They came the next day. They came out and got our trash. What? They came that day. And they came out and got our trash. But I was thinking about that when I was working on this week. And here's what I'm going to say, you guys. We have missed the trash pickup by a long shot in our world. It is not great. Things are piling up. The can is overflowing. And we are not going to make it to next week. Could we be willing to call the one in charge? Could we be willing to ask him to come? And I'm not just talking about an election. I'm talking about for some of us, it's our relationships, it's our marriage, it's our friendships, it's our relationships with family members that we do not want to spend time with this coming Thanksgiving. Right? It's people we work with, it's people we used to be friends with. It's all these things that we carry, and the trash is overflowing. And we don't know what to do about it. And we don't know how we can ever be the righteousness of God. Here's the thing that I think we need to remember. God made Jesus trash. He made him our trash so that we could be clean. For others who don't know what to do with the trash in their own lives. We're saved from our own trash that is piled up that we can't do anything about. but we are also saved for the destiny of being God's righteousness in this world. And it all hinges on where we're looking, is what the Bible says. It says, where are your eyes? What are you focused on? When you're in the middle of that anxious place, when you're in the middle of that difficult place, when you're in the middle of that angry place, where are your eyes? When you're in a situation where everybody is anxious, nervous, worried, or angry, when you want to stop listening and start talking, where are your eyes? Are they on you or on the situation? Are they on the other person or are they on God? When you are ready to get angry, where are your eyes? Imagine the world where you can have your eyes on the righteousness of God and reflect that righteousness to the people around you. I want to tell you guys, one of my dreams for Highland, somebody asked me this week, they're like, why are you talking about this? Why are you doing this now? You say you don't want to do this, why are you doing this now? Because here's one of my dreams for Highlands. One of my dreams for Highlands is that we could become a place where our eyes are in the right place, and so that we could have groups of people, and one of you could say, I voted for this person, and one of you could say, I voted for this person, and one of you could say, I didn't vote for anybody, and you could all sit down together over a meal and talk about it in light of who Jesus is. And you could say to each other, well, because of my relationship with Jesus and what I hear him say, that's why I voted this way, or that's why I didn't even vote. And you could have a conversation where we can actually grow into a better understanding of what it means to live out that calling in our world. That is my dream. I don't know what's yours. What could you imagine for yourself, for your loved ones, for your work, for your school, for the people that are going to be angry, scared, hurting, and maybe even violent in the coming weeks? Could you be a place where people who are incredibly uncomfortable can find comfort no matter what? That's what we want. And the way we do that is through putting our eyes on Jesus.